Okay, this is going to be a short little video on the Vikings, and I decided to jazz it up using uh, a TV show that I like called Vikings, and this is Ragnar Lothbrok, who is, while this is a fictional television show, it's based on true people, I guess. Ragnar Lothbrok was an actual Viking. So, enjoy. Okay, so this point in Europe, we are looking at a lot of uh, invaders, right? And especially after the Roman Empire fell, um, Europe is sort of kind of plunged into what is called the Dark Ages, as it just as we see different groups coming in and out, um, which kind of sets Europe back from uniting or creating any real lasting empire. So two groups that are not Vikings but are kind of major players here are the Magyars and the Muslims. And the Muslims, of course, we'll discuss more in depth later. And I should say they're Arab Muslims. So the Magyars, I thought I might just for the basics, we will know them as Hungarians. But they're kind of unusual in terms of some of the other groups in Europe, that at some point in history they were coming back from the Ural Mountains. And so they're a different linguistic group than, than their European neighbors. And so I think that's what kind of separates them. But eventually, as you can see, the Hungarian plain there, they're going to settle here. About this time, they come over the Carpathian Mountains and kind of start to settle. So while they settle there, they carry out different raids throughout Europe. So for about 300 years, right, we see this kind of happening throughout Europe. And so hopefully you've committed this map to memory. So all our purple arrows here are the Viking invasion routes. And I think we looked at a map similar to this when we were talking about early Russia. And so remember we were looking here. And so here are our Magyars, which you can see that they're coming out through Central Europe, even into Italy. And then the yellow are our Muslim areas, right? And they're the routes that they would come into Europe. So kind of keep an eye on this, but of course the people we'll talk about the most right now are our Vikings. As you can see, they were out and about a little bit more. So our essential information. So the Vikings from about 800 to 1000 CE, they were a fairly powerful force in Europe, certainly one of destabilizing force, I should say. So they were often known as the Norsemen or the Northmen because they were coming from what is today Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And so they were primarily raiders. So they raided along coasts, they raided cities that were on rivers. And so they would just go before people even knew what hit them, right? Go grab treasure and head back to home. But when they weren't raiding, they were also warriors, explorers, traders, and farmers. And then they would raid at the times of the year when they weren't doing those other things. And so Vikings were out and about, right? They would make it to Constantinople and other places. In 1000 CE, Leif Erikson made it all the way to North America. So they were great shipbuilders and sailors. And so this is their secret weapon, again, from the show Vikings. But I thought this was interesting. This is the English depiction of Danish longboats, probably as close as we can get to a primary source. So the longboat is the secret to Viking success. And so here's some information about the longboat. So this is the key here, right? They could cross the open ocean, but they still had to draw small enough that they could then sail up the shallow rivers of Europe. And so they could carry then up to 300 Vikings. So you can see kind of the decorations here. They also had, so here's kind of a remnants of a Viking ship, a longboat in a museum, maybe in Sweden. But so here's some other advantages. So this is their secret to the success and what allowed them to get out and about as they carried on these raiding campaigns. And so this is something also unique, reminds me a little bit of the Greeks, right? They came together with shields and they kind of advanced as one unit. And so you probably, like I said, before these villages and cities and coastal areas could even get their acts together to defend them, the Vikings were gone. And so these, you're going to be a little scared when these guys show up. Well, maybe you won't be that scared if he shows up, am I right? If all the Vikings look like that. So here are, you can see as we approach 1000 CE, Vikings start to settle in Europe and blend in with the populations. So especially in Iceland, parts of England and Scotland, but here you can see them getting up to fairly great distances, right? Up through here, right, around Spain into Constantinople. And we'll just wrap it up here with a little bit of the Viking culture. They were polytheistic. Much of since their life was kind of around war and warrior cultures and the values of warriors, their gods and their mythology reflected that. I think the afterlife was one of, I don't know, eternal conflict, and great warriors kept on fighting to the end. They did have some social hierarchy, but fairly basic, right? They had the aristocrats to the peasant farmers and then slaves. So in their raids, they'd often bring people back to Scandinavia. And something that I think is also interesting is that women had a relatively free status. So here's one of our Viking princesses and warrior women. They often fought alongside their men, and they had more freedom than I think many of their contemporaries. And so these are some remnants of a Viking house in Iceland. This is a reconstructive chieftain house, these long houses where the chief of different tribal groups would reside, and then you could see that they're also gathering places. And then they had lettering and symbols. You can see the runes here. This is from Sweden. So some of their imagery here, and then the lettering off to the side. So that's about it in terms of the Vikings. But if you would like to know more, feel free to check out Vikings on the History Channel. But remember, they're Vikings. So if you don't like the blood and guts and battle, it might not be the show for you. So enjoy.